Pete Najarian. This is The Take for Market Rebellion, the start of another new week. Well, wow, what an incredible week we had last week. When you go across the entire week, it was all about opening, reopening, and of course, what's happening? What kind of acceleration are we seeing in terms of the virus itself? But the quote of the week had to have come midweek from Chairman Powell when he said, of the Fed, he said, "We are not thinking about raising rates. We're not even thinking about raising rates." I thought that was really, really interesting. We've said it for a long period of time. They've been very transparent, and the Fed has our back. To as much of a degree as they can, they've got our back. And they have already proven that by many of the different actions that they have taken. And certainly that has helped the markets in extreme ways in terms of a lot of the movement from where we absolutely were getting crushed to the downside to where we are now. But that doesn't change the idea that there is volatility each and every day, and the read through every day is going to be a little bit different. So what an incredible June that for last week, when we look at the volatility and we look at the volumes, so last week we lose about 5% in the Dow. A little over 3% in the NASDAQ, or right around 3%, around 5%, give or take, in the S&P. Really a pretty tough week. So you kind of wonder as we're going through all of this, all right, well, where do we go to now? We had watched volatility get all the way down to the 24s, spiking back up. We had that big, huge jump day, and spiking back up, got up to 44, closed the week at 36 in terms of the volatility index itself. Volumes, I've been talking about these volumes for a really long period of time. Let's be honest, the volumes are there. The volumes are supportive of these moves, and we continue to see these volumes explode to the upside. Give you a little bit of an idea. 3 of the 6 trading sessions so far, of the last 6 trading sessions, have had more than 43 million contracts trading. Now, June, we're averaging 35.2 million per day, and the year-to-date average is about 28.5 million per day. Gives you an idea that we have had 3 days over 43 million contracts trading, 43 million being the lowest of those 3 days, and that was just this past Friday. So incredible volumes, unbelievable. We had a Dow that spiked up about 500 points on Friday. Got a Dow that's pushing down about 500 points today. We'll get a little bit more into that in one second. But what was really driving the markets? Well, the combination of so many different parts of the economy that we talk about all the time. When we're up days, it's going to be driven by industrials, it's going to be financials, and the travel and leisure names. Well, I'll go through a quick list for you of what exactly I mean by that. So Delta, United, Norwegian Cruise Lines, American Airlines, Carnival Cruise, you get the idea, all up more than 12% on Friday. Just on Friday. Just monstrous moves in the travel and leisure space because the focus was more on the reopening. And Boeing up 11.5%, Dow up 5%, Raytheon up 4%. The financials, look at Goldman Sachs, American Express, JP Morgan, all of those up 3% or more. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of, okay, we're up about 500 points. What was the focus? So today, we focused back on the reopening, but there's a lot of nervousness out there because of the reopening of the rising coronavirus. So today, that seems to be the focus. So as folks are looking at this very, very closely, you're starting to see exactly the same names that were going up are now going down. Look at the industrials. Boeing, it's down 4.5%. Dow, down 3.5%. Caterpillar getting beat up a little bit today, down about 4%. Looking at the markets off to the side, we were down 700 points. Then we were down about 600, 500. Now a little bit less than that. So we are off of the lows, and that's something to be good. So as we were down about 600 points, I was just taking a look. Well, what's really kind of working today? You could probably guess. Zoom. Everybody knows that because as we go down, then everybody starts to scramble for those stocks that people are looking for when people are not going to be going back out as much. And it's probably a little bit early to start making that kind of a read through, but Zoom up about 6.5%. And you got all the gaming stocks. You got Take-Two Interactive, you got Electronic Arts, all the various names, Activision, all up pretty strong. Netflix, either flat or in the green, while the market was down 600 points, mind you. So that's pretty amazing. Now, the travel and leisure stocks, they're down today, down about 7% across the board. But you look at Norwegian, you look at United, American, all the same names once again. Marriott, Wynn down about 4.5%. So getting pushed pretty hard down there. So that's that's been something that's just been playing out, seems like daily, this rotational thing of where is the focus? And if the focus is on the reopening, those same stocks seem to be moving to the upside. We focus now on all of the rise in the coronavirus. Starts to get pushed down again. Now, we're only a little over a half an hour into the day. I just wanted to jump on early today just because so much is going on. Figured to give you a quick early flash. So energy down about 3.7%. Now, Exxon and Chevron really moving that move down today in the XLE. I got to point out to you, you look over at WTI. Now, we had that big run, 17. I talked about it a couple times, $17 all the way up to $40 in a very, very short time frame, just a little over a month or so, up to $40. Then we've just been kind of pulling back a little bit each and every day. Now we're back underneath 35. So it would make some sense that there's a little bit of pressure on some of these energy names. That's exactly what we're seeing. The OIH names that we talk about, some of the secondary names as well, pulling back a little bit as oil has pulled back well over $5 from those recent highs. So that's something to keep an eye on. Now, the volatility index today, of course, spiking big time. We got up towards 42, 44 towards the highs in some of the early market, but we're only 40 minutes into the trading day. We're only up 6% on the VIX now. We're trading underneath 39. So gives you a little bit of idea of how much volatility there is in volatility. And I say that because that's absolutely true. And we talked about last week, the 8th largest one-day move in the VIX of all time happened last week. So gives you a little idea of just how much nervousness there is out there right now and the sheer movement that we've had. When we were down 700 points, you're talking about a VIX that probably ought to be trading something north of a 32. So you get up towards 40 and you build in a few other things. And that was very early in the trading session. So really, really interesting. You know, the one area that's kind of held up throughout this whole thing, and I've brought it up time and time again, it is not just the Power Five. It is not just the big five names. So forget all that for a second. But take a look over at the SMH. You look at these chip names. They really have performed extremely well in negative markets, in positive markets. They've been just sort of this stair-stepping higher. And names like AMD and NVIDIA and Micron and Intel and all the names that you're familiar with, they've all had a nice, solid, continual move to the upside that's been very interesting. And they pulled back on big days to the downside, but not nearly to the extent of the others. When we were down at the lows, I took a quick look over at the chips in the SMH. It was down just a little over 1%, while everything else we were looking at is down 2%, 3%, 4%. So it gives you a sense of there's not really an appetite for selling a lot of those names. As a matter of fact, the appetite still continues to be a lot of buying. And you take a look at some of those charts, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So we're going to pivot real quick, but it kind of brings us back. So this whole thing really kind of revolves around the coronavirus. And so we haven't talked as much about some of the biotech names that have been very, very interesting. We've talked about some of the great moves over periods of time where a lot of people weren't focusing on the XBI or the IBB and some of those names out there in terms of looking at the big, broad sectors. But in healthcare alone, we have had some really, really interesting paper. We've had some nice moves to the upside and obviously some pullbacks as well along the way. So GSK, GlaxoSmithKline, this name, we do not see this one a lot. There's a lot of names in certain areas, in certain sectors that hit fairly consistently. This is not one of them, but it does hit on the unusual option activity once in a while, and it did today. So what did they do? Bought 18,000 of the June 41 calls. Average price, I'm just going to ballpark the average, about 50 cents. Stock was trading a little bit over 40, call it 40.10, something in that range. So huge buyer. That was pretty interesting. That really stood out. We had, we're early in the day. We don't have as much option trading as we normally would in the first 30, 40 minutes, but that name really stuck out right away. The second we saw that was interesting because, again, a name we don't see very often, very large trade, 18,000 of these calls were bought. They did have some news out today talking about a drug approval, so there is reason that there's some bullishness right now. But I would also add to that we talk about pipelines all the time, and many of these different pharma type names, biotech names, have incredible pipelines. And I think that gets lost in the shuffle, and that oftentimes is sort of the read-through that a lot of people have in terms of looking forward, not just looking at what's in front of them right now, but looking forward. So I'd keep an eye on that as well. Might be a really interesting one to at least watch and maybe get a sense of what. Now, again, really short time frame. These expire June expiration. That's a very, very short time frame right now. So Have a great day at trading. Educate yourself. Understand what's going on in the world of the derivatives world, because I keep bringing this up. Volume day after day after day after day. Monstrous volume, and continues to get bigger and bigger. And our year-to-date average right now is about 8 million, a little more than 8 million per day higher than our highest year ever. So that gives you a really good sense of, hey, where's the growth? Where is the leverage? Where is there a way to reduce risk, not just add risk, but reduce risk? It's the options world. But you've got to be educated. You have to understand what you're doing so you don't have a terrible experience. You have to have the knowledge. Knowledge is king. I'm Pete Najarian. This is the Market Rebellion.